The shrill sound of Karen Whitmore's voice piercing the morning air like a smoke alarm with abandonment issues was my first clue that Tuesday was about to become very expensive for someone, and it wasn't going to be us. But here's the thing about entitled HOA presidents who wear white tennis outfits like military uniforms and treat luxury car dealerships like their personal showrooms. They never expect to discover that the stolen vehicle they're screaming about actually belongs to someone with enough money to buy the entire dealership. By the time I finished documenting her public meltdown over a car she'd never owned, this tennis-obsessed suburban dictator had committed felony false reporting, faced criminal charges, and learned the hard way that some celebrities have receipts for everything, including cars worth more than most people's houses. Seriously, what would you do if some HOA Karen called the police on you for opening your own garage and claimed you'd stolen the car she'd been shopping for? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I need to see if this level of delusional entitlement exists in your neighborhood too. Let me back up and tell you how this whole nightmare started. My name is Derek Williams, and I've been Rihanna's personal assistant and security coordinator for 4 years. When you work for someone whose business empire spans fashion, cosmetics, and music with a net worth that makes small countries jealous, you learn to expect the unexpected. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for dealing with Karen Whitmore and her pathological need to control everyone and everything in the Platinum Heights development. Rihanna had purchased her property in Platinum Heights 6 months ago, a stunning $18 million compound with 8 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, and a 6-car garage that could house a small auto dealership. The house sits on 3 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds with privacy hedges tall enough to block satellite surveillance and security systems that make Fort Knox look casual. Karen Whitmore, meanwhile, lived in the smaller but still impressive $3.2 million colonial 2 streets over, where she'd established herself as the self-appointed queen of community standards and neighborhood aesthetics. At 35, Karen had the kind of restless energy that comes from having too much time, too much money, and not enough actual problems to solve. Picture this. Karen's daily uniform consisted of pristine white tennis outfits from brands that cost more than minimum wage workers make in a month. Her platinum blonde hair was always styled in what hairdressers politely call the country club cut. Perfectly layered, expensively maintained, and sprayed into submission with products that probably violated several environmental protection laws. She drove a white Range Rover that never showed a speck of dirt and carried a white leather tennis bag even when she wasn't headed to the courts. Karen's morning routine was legendary in Platinum Heights. She'd emerge from her house at exactly 7:30 a.m., wearing her tennis whites, designer sunglasses, and an expression that suggested she'd been personally offended by the sunrise. She'd patrol the development in her spotless Range Rover, documenting any violations of her personal aesthetic vision with the dedication of a war crimes investigator. Mailboxes that weren't perfectly aligned, garden landscaping that deviated from her approved color palette, cars parked at angles that displeased her geometric sensibilities. Karen treated the entire neighborhood like her personal kingdom, and every resident like a subject who existed solely for her approval or disapproval. The trouble started 3 weeks ago when Rihanna decided she needed a new car for her collection. Not just any car, she wanted something that would make a statement about success, taste, and the kind of fuck you money that comes from building a billion-dollar business empire before your 40th birthday. We spent 2 days visiting luxury dealerships around Los Angeles, looking at options that ranged from expensive to you could buy a small island for that price. Rihanna's requirements were specific: unique color, limited production, and performance capabilities that would make Formula One drivers nervous. At Beverly Hills Luxury Motors, we found exactly what she was looking for: a 2024 Lamborghini Huracan Sterrato in Arancio Zanto, a orange so vibrant it looked like liquid fire under showroom lights. Only 199 units were being produced worldwide, with a base price of $265,000 before the extensive customization package Rihanna ordered. The customization process took 2 weeks and added another $85,000 to the final price. Custom orange leather interior, upgraded sound system, personalized floor mats with RR monograms, and a paint protection film that cost more than most people's annual salary. The total came to $349,900. Paid in full with a wire transfer that cleared faster than most people's coffee orders. Here's where the timeline becomes important. While we were finalizing Rihanna's purchase, Karen Whitmore was apparently visiting the same dealership. According to sales manager Michael Rodriguez, whom I spoke with later, Karen had been obsessing over the same Lamborghini for weeks. She came in almost daily, Michael told me, shaking his head with the weary expression of someone who dealt with more entitled customers than he cared to remember. She'd sit in the car, take selfies, even brought friends to show it off. But every time we talked numbers, she'd find excuses to delay the purchase. The truth was that Karen wanted the car desperately, but even with her husband's construction company income and her family money, a $350,000 vehicle was a stretch that would require liquidating investments and possibly taking out loans. She was caught between her desire for the status symbol and the practical reality that she couldn't easily afford it. Meanwhile, Karen had apparently convinced herself and several neighbors that the Lamborghini was essentially hers. She'd posted pictures on social media sitting behind the wheel, captioned with things like making some big decisions, and sometimes you have to treat yourself. Her friends at the tennis club had been hearing about Karen's new Lamborghini for weeks. She'd shown them photos, discussed color options, and even planned which social events would serve as the car's public debut. In Karen's mind, the purchase was a foregone conclusion. She just needed to work out the financial details. So when Michael called her on a Tuesday morning to inform her that the Lamborghini Huracan had been sold to another customer, Karen's reaction was immediate and volcanic. "What do you mean sold?" she screamed into the phone, loud enough that Michael had to hold the receiver away from his ear. "I've been working on financing for 2 weeks. You can't sell my car to someone else." Michael patiently explained that no deposit had been placed, no financing had been approved, and no purchase agreement had been signed. The car had never been Karen's in any legal sense. But Karen wasn't interested in legal technicalities. "Who bought it?" she demanded. "Give me their name and contact information. This is unacceptable customer service." Michael, following dealership policy and basic common sense, refused to provide customer information. That's when Karen demanded to speak to the owner, threatened legal action, and promised to destroy the dealership's reputation on social media. The conversation ended with Karen hanging up and immediately calling her lawyer, who probably earned his retainer fee just from listening to her explain why she believed she had legal claim to a car she'd never purchased. But Karen wasn't done. She spent the rest of Tuesday driving around Platinum Heights like a woman possessed, looking for the orange Lamborghini that she was convinced had been stolen from her by some mysterious rival. In her mind, the car rightfully belonged to her, and whoever had purchased it was either a thief or a co-conspirator in the dealership's betrayal. That evening, Karen organized an emergency HOA meeting to discuss fraudulent vehicle activities affecting community security. She'd somehow convinced herself that the Lamborghini situation was connected to broader criminal activity that threatened property values and neighborhood safety. The meeting, held in her living room with 3 other board members, produced a resolution declaring that any luxury vehicles purchased from Beverly Hills Luxury Motors should be reported to the HOA for verification of legitimate ownership. It was insane, completely unenforceable, and probably violated several laws, but it gave Karen a sense of taking action against the perceived injustice. Meanwhile, Rihanna's Lamborghini was being detailed and prepared for delivery, completely unaware that its future owner had already been declared a car thief by someone who'd never owned anything more exotic than a white Range Rover with heated seats. The delivery was scheduled for Thursday morning, and I'd arranged for the car to be transported directly to Rihanna's garage to avoid any unnecessary attention or security concerns. What I didn't anticipate was that Karen Whitmore had been conducting surveillance of every luxury car delivery in the neighborhood, armed with binoculars, a notebook, and an increasingly unhinged theory about organized auto theft. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of perfect California sunshine that makes everything look like a movie set. The transport truck arrived at 9:30 a.m., and I met the driver at Rihanna's front gate to coordinate the delivery. The Lamborghini looked even more stunning in natural sunlight. The orange paint seemed to glow with an inner fire that made every other car look beige by comparison. As we unloaded the car and drove it into the garage, I noticed a white Range Rover parked across the street. Through the tinted windows, I could see someone with blonde hair holding what looked like binoculars or a camera with a long lens. But luxury neighborhoods attract their share of curious neighbors and car enthusiasts, so I didn't think much of it. That was my first mistake. I should have realized that Karen Whitmore wasn't just any curious neighbor. She was a woman who'd spent 3 weeks convincing herself that this specific car belonged to her, and seeing it delivered to someone else's garage was about to trigger a psychological break that would make reality TV producers weep with joy. My second mistake was underestimating how quickly Karen could mobilize when she believed she was witnessing a crime in progress. Within minutes of the delivery truck leaving, she was on the phone with 911, reporting what she was certain was a theft in progress involving the car she'd been purchasing for weeks. "I need police immediately," she told the dispatcher, her voice tight with righteous indignation. "Someone just delivered a stolen Lamborghini to 1247 Ocean View Drive. This is the car I've been buying from Beverly Hills Luxury Motors, and now it's in someone else's garage. This is organized auto theft, and I demand immediate action." The 911 call, which I later obtained through a public records request, was a masterpiece of delusional entitlement mixed with complete misunderstanding of how car purchases work. Karen provided detailed descriptions of the vehicle, explained her purchase history with the dealership, and insisted that the delivery she'd witnessed was evidence of criminal conspiracy. "The car is orange, a Lamborghini Huracan. License plate," she paused, apparently realizing she didn't actually know the license plate number. "Well, it doesn't matter. I know it's my car because I've been working with the dealer for weeks." The dispatcher, trained to take all theft reports seriously, dispatched 2 patrol units to investigate. What they found was about to turn Karen's delusional morning into a very real legal nightmare that would cost her everything she thought she knew about property ownership and the consequences of false reporting. But first, they had to deal with the fact that Karen was standing in the street wearing her tennis whites and waving her arms like an air traffic controller, demanding they arrest whoever was inside the house for receiving stolen property. The officers had no way of knowing they were about to become unwilling participants in a suburban drama that would end with criminal charges, viral social media coverage, and one very expensive lesson about the difference between wanting something and actually owning it. The arrival of Officers Martinez and Johnson at 10:47 a.m. marked the moment when Karen Whitmore's delusional fantasy about car ownership collided with the brutal reality of police procedures and legal facts. But here's the thing about entitled HOA presidents who file false police reports while wearing pristine white tennis outfits. They never expect the officers to actually investigate their claims, instead of just arresting whoever they're pointing at. The metallic taste of adrenaline mixed with disbelief filled my mouth as I watched Karen march toward the police cruisers like she was leading a cavalry charge, her blonde hair bouncing with righteous indignation and her tennis shoes squeaking against the asphalt with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong about anything in her privileged life. Officer Martinez, a 20-year veteran with the kind of patient expression that comes from dealing with every variety of suburban drama, approached Karen with his notebook ready and his bullshit detector fully operational. Officer Johnson, younger but equally professional, positioned himself where he could observe both Karen's theatrical performance and our property simultaneously. "Ma'am, you called about a stolen vehicle?" Martinez asked, his voice carrying that careful neutrality police officers use when they suspect they're about to hear something that will test their professional composure. Karen's response revealed everything about her mental state and her complete disconnect from reality. She launched into a breathless explanation that sounded like a legal thriller written by someone who'd never seen the inside of a courtroom. "Officers, thank God you're here," she began, gesturing dramatically toward our garage with the kind of sweeping arm movements usually reserved for Shakespearean tragedies. "That orange Lamborghini in there is mine. I've been purchasing it from Beverly Hills Luxury Motors for weeks. The dealership was supposed to deliver it to my house, but somehow it ended up here instead." She pointed at our property with the confidence of someone providing crucial evidence in a murder trial. "I watched them unload my car and drive it into that garage not 30 minutes ago. This is clearly organized auto theft, and I demand you arrest whoever is inside for receiving stolen property." Officer Martinez glanced at his partner with the kind of look that passes between experienced cops when they realize they're dealing with a situation that's going to require paperwork, patience, and possibly a supervisor's intervention. "Ma'am, do you have documentation showing ownership of this vehicle?" Martinez asked, clicking his pen with the methodical precision of someone preparing to take detailed notes. Karen's hesitation lasted exactly 3 seconds too long. "Well, not exactly ownership papers yet, but I've been working with the dealer. I have pictures of myself sitting in the car. I've been planning this purchase for weeks. Do you have a purchase agreement, financing documents, or a bill of sale?" Johnson added, approaching the conversation from a different angle. "The paperwork was still being finalized," Karen replied, her voice rising slightly as she apparently realized her evidence might not be as solid as she'd convinced herself. "But that doesn't matter. I know that car, and I know it belongs to me." That's when I decided to make my presence known. I walked out of the house carrying a folder that contained everything Officer Martinez would need to resolve this situation quickly and completely. "Officers, I'm Derek Williams, and I represent the homeowner," I said, extending my hand professionally. "I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding about vehicle ownership." Karen's reaction was immediate and predictably explosive. "There's no misunderstanding. That man is harboring my stolen car." I opened my folder and handed Officer Martinez a complete documentation package. Here's the bill of sale from Beverly Hills Luxury Motors, dated last Thursday. Purchase price $349,900, paid in full by wire transfer. Vehicle identification number matches the Lamborghini in our garage. Insurance documents, registration papers, and the dealer's delivery confirmation. Officer Martinez reviewed the documents with the thoroughness of someone who'd learned not to take anything at face value. After several minutes of careful examination, he looked up with an expression that suggested Karen's day was about to get significantly worse. "Ma'am, these documents show clear legal ownership by the homeowner. Do you have any documentation indicating you actually purchased this vehicle?" Karen's world began cracking like ice on a warm pond. But I was buying it. I was at the dealership every day. They knew I wanted it. Wanting to purchase something and actually purchasing it are two different things, Officer Johnson explained with the patience of someone addressing a confused child. "Do you have any proof of payment, financing approval, or a signed purchase agreement?" "I don't need proof," Karen screamed, her tennis whites now showing stress sweat and her carefully styled hair beginning to show the effects of her emotional meltdown. "I know that car. I've been planning to buy it for weeks." That's when Officer Martinez delivered the information that would transform this from a simple misunderstanding into a criminal matter. "Ma'am, filing a false police report is a misdemeanor offense in California. Based on the documentation provided, you called 911 to report a theft of property you never owned. That's a serious matter." Karen's face went through several interesting color changes as she processed what the officer had just said. The implications were apparently sinking in faster than she could manufacture justifications. "This isn't a false report," she insisted, but her voice had lost its commanding tone and taken on the desperate quality of someone watching their narrative collapse in real time. "The dealership made a mistake. They were supposed to sell it to me." I pulled out my phone and called Beverly Hills Luxury Motors, putting the conversation on speaker with the officer's permission. Sales manager Michael Rodriguez answered on the second ring. "Beverly Hills Luxury Motors, Michael speaking." "Michael, this is Derek Williams representing the purchaser of the orange Lamborghini Huracan. I'm here with police officers investigating a theft report. Can you confirm the details of this sale?" Michael's voice carried the weariness of someone who'd been dreading this conversation. "Mr. Williams, yes. The vehicle was purchased legally and in full by your client on Thursday. Title transferred completely. As for Mrs. Whitmore," he paused, apparently choosing his words carefully, "she expressed interest in the vehicle but never completed any purchase process. No deposit, no financing approval, no signed agreements." Karen tried to grab the phone from my hand. "Michael, tell them about our discussions. Tell them I was buying that car." Michael's response was diplomatically devastating. "Mrs. Whitmore, discussing a potential purchase and actually making a purchase are different things. You visited the showroom frequently, but you never completed any transaction. The vehicle was sold to another customer who provided full payment." Officer Martinez took the phone and spoke directly with Michael, confirming details about the sale process, payment methods, and Karen's actual involvement with the dealership. The conversation lasted 10 minutes and left no doubt about the legal ownership of the Lamborghini. After hanging up, Martinez turned to Karen with an expression that had shifted from patient professionalism to barely contained annoyance. "Ma'am, based on this investigation, there's no evidence of any theft. The vehicle was legally purchased by the homeowner and delivered to their property. You filed a false police report, which is a criminal offense." Karen's meltdown reached new heights of suburban entitlement. "This is discrimination. You're taking their side because they have more money. I'm a respected member of this community. I'm the HOA President. Ma'am, your position in the Homeowners Association doesn't change the law regarding false reporting." Officer Johnson replied with the kind of calm that comes from years of dealing with entitled residents who believe their zip code grants them immunity from consequences. That's when Karen made the tactical error that would elevate this from a simple false report to a more serious harassment charge. She pulled out her phone and began recording the officers while making accusations about police corruption and discrimination. "This is Karen Whitmore, and I'm being discriminated against by the police department," she announced to her phone camera, apparently planning to live stream her version of events. "These officers are refusing to investigate a clear case of auto theft because the thieves have more money." Officer Martinez stepped forward with the kind of authority that ends conversations. "Ma'am, you're being issued a citation for filing a false police report. You have the right to contest this in court, but continuing to make false accusations isn't helping your situation." Karen's social media livestream captured her receiving the citation, arguing with officers, and making increasingly unhinged claims about corruption and conspiracy. What she didn't realize was that her livestream was creating a permanent record of her behavior that would later be used as evidence of her harassment pattern. As the officers prepared to leave, Karen made one final attempt to salvage her narrative. "This isn't over. I know people in this city. My husband has connections. You'll be hearing from our lawyer." Officer Martinez handed her the citation with the weary professionalism of someone who'd heard identical threats from countless entitled residents. "Ma'am, you have 30 days to respond to this citation. I recommend consulting with an attorney about the consequences of filing false police reports." After the officers left, Karen stood in the street wearing her wrinkled tennis whites, holding her citation, and apparently processing the reality that her morning had gone spectacularly wrong. Her livestream had captured everything, including her threats against police officers and her admission that she'd never actually owned the car she'd reported stolen. But Karen wasn't done. If anything, the police citation had convinced her that she was the victim of a vast conspiracy involving luxury car dealers, corrupt police officers, and whoever was living in the house that now contained her Lamborghini. She spent the rest of the afternoon researching the property records for Rihanna's address, discovering for the first time that her new neighbor was not just wealthy but internationally famous. This revelation would transform Karen's car obsession into a full-scale celebrity harassment campaign that would make her morning police encounter look like a minor warm-up for the legal nightmare she was about to create. As I watched Karen drive away in her white Range Rover, still talking animatedly to her phone camera, I realized this wasn't going to end with a simple citation. Karen Whitmore had the kind of entitled personality that doesn't accept defeat gracefully, and discovering that she'd just accused a global superstar of car theft was going to trigger an escalation that would test every legal and security measure we had in place. The war between Karen's delusional sense of ownership and Rihanna's actual ownership of everything she'd legally purchased was just beginning, and based on Karen's livestream comments about not letting this go and getting justice, I suspected our quiet Tuesday morning was about to become a very public and very expensive lesson in the consequences of confusing desire with ownership. Karen's discovery that she'd just accused Rihanna of car theft triggered a psychological transformation that turned suburban entitlement into full-scale celebrity stalking, faster than her white Range Rover could speed through a school zone. The bitter taste of defeat mixed with obsessive determination as Karen spent the next 48 hours researching every detail of Rihanna's life, business empire, and previous legal battles like she was preparing for war against someone who owned more property than some small countries. But here's the thing about delusional HOA presidents who escalate minor disputes into federal harassment cases. They never realize they're creating evidence trails that prosecutors love more than birthday presents. Karen's first move after receiving her false police report citation was calling an emergency HOA board meeting to discuss what she termed celebrity security threats affecting community property values. The meeting, held in her pristine white-on-white living room while she paced back and forth in fresh tennis whites, produced a resolution that would later become Exhibit A in multiple criminal cases. "We have a dangerous situation developing," Karen announced to board members Patricia Goldstein, Robert Chen, and David Morrison, her voice carrying the kind of urgent authority usually reserved for natural disasters. "This so-called celebrity has moved into our community and is already engaging in fraudulent activities with stolen vehicles." Patricia, a retired real estate attorney with enough common sense to recognize insanity when she heard it, tried to inject reality into the conversation. "Karen, didn't the police confirm that the car was legally purchased? Maybe we should focus on actual HOA business instead of—" "The police were obviously paid off," Karen interrupted, her blonde hair catching the overhead lighting as she gestured dramatically. "Rich celebrities think they can buy their way out of consequences. But I know what I saw, and I know that car belongs in my garage, not hers." The meeting minutes, which Patricia secretly recorded on her phone for legal protection, captured Karen proposing a comprehensive surveillance and harassment campaign disguised as enhanced community security measures. The proposals included mandatory celebrity resident background checks, restrictions on luxury vehicle deliveries, and what Karen called lifestyle monitoring protocols. But Karen's most revealing statement came when she outlined her personal mission. "I'm going to prove this Rihanna person is a fraud, a criminal, and a threat to our community. No one makes me look like a fool in front of police officers and gets away with it." Meanwhile, I was coordinating with Rihanna's legal team about the escalating situation. Lead attorney Sandra Morrison had reviewed the police report, Karen's livestream footage, and the HOA meeting minutes with the kind of professional excitement that comes from building an airtight harassment case. "Derek, this woman is creating a prosecutor's dream scenario," Sandra explained during our conference call. She's documenting her own criminal intent, making public threats, and establishing a clear pattern of racially motivated harassment. Every social media post, every HOA meeting, every interaction with neighbors is evidence of systematic targeting. Sandra's strategy was elegantly simple: let Karen escalate her harassment while we documented everything, then use federal civil rights laws to destroy her so completely that she'd become a cautionary tale for other entitled suburbanites with delusions of authority. Karen's escalation began with a comprehensive social media campaign designed to expose what she called the truth about celebrity criminals in luxury communities. Her Facebook posts, Instagram stories, and Nextdoor app complaints painted Rihanna as a dangerous fraud who'd corrupted local police through bribery and intimidation. Day 3 of Celebrity Crime Watch, Karen posted on Facebook, along with photos of Rihanna's house taken from public sidewalks. Still no investigation into the stolen Lamborghini. How much money does it take to buy police protection in this city? Our children deserve answers. The post included a link to her new blog, Platinum Heights Truth, where Karen published detailed theories about celebrity criminal conspiracies, police corruption, and the systematic targeting of honest community leaders who dared to speak truth to power. But Karen's most dangerous escalation was her decision to organize what she called community protection patrols, groups of residents who would maintain 24-hour surveillance of Rihanna's property to document criminal activity and protect neighborhood children from dangerous celebrity influences. The surveillance operation, coordinated through a private Facebook group Karen created called Platinum Heights Defense Force, included detailed schedules for monitoring Rihanna's house, photographing visitors, and recording license plate numbers of delivery vehicles. Karen recruited 8 neighbors for her surveillance team, providing them with binoculars, cameras, and notebooks for maintaining criminal activity logs. She established communication protocols using encrypted messaging apps and created code names for different types of suspicious activity. Operation Celebrity Watch is now active, Karen announced in the Facebook group, posting a surveillance schedule that covered every hour of every day. Document everything. These people think they're above the law, but community vigilance will expose the truth. The surveillance logs, which I later obtained through legal discovery, read like intelligence reports written by someone who'd learned espionage from watching too many spy movies. 11:47 a.m., subject received Amazon delivery, package size indicates possible electronic surveillance equipment. 2:33 p.m., black SUV with tinted windows arrived, possible security team coordination. Every mundane aspect of Rihanna's daily life became evidence of criminal conspiracy in Karen's increasingly paranoid worldview. Grocery deliveries became money laundering operations. Security team rotations became criminal planning sessions. Even landscaping crews became suspicious because they looked like gang members to Karen's expert eye. But Karen's surveillance operation had a fatal flaw. It was being conducted by amateurs who didn't understand the legal boundaries between public observation and criminal stalking. Within a week, her community defense force had committed multiple felonies, including trespassing, harassment, and violation of privacy laws. The breaking point came when Karen escalated from passive surveillance to active confrontation. She'd convinced herself that Rihanna was planning some kind of criminal operation, and her duty as a community leader required direct intervention. On Thursday morning, Karen appeared at Rihanna's front gate, wearing her standard white tennis outfit and carrying a leather portfolio containing what she called evidence of ongoing criminal activities. She demanded immediate access to speak with Rihanna about returning stolen property and ceasing illegal operations. When security personnel politely explained that Rihanna wasn't available for unscheduled meetings, Karen's response revealed the full extent of her psychological deterioration. "I know she's in there planning her next crime," Karen screamed loud enough to be heard 3 blocks away. "I have evidence of stolen cars, bribed police officers, and criminal conspiracy. This is a citizen's arrest situation." She then attempted to force her way past security, claiming legal authority as HOA president to enter any property in Platinum Heights for community safety purposes. The confrontation, captured on multiple security cameras, showed Karen attacking a security guard while screaming about celebrity criminals and corrupt police protection. The assault charge was filed within hours. Karen's attack on security personnel, combined with her weeks of documented harassment and surveillance, triggered a comprehensive federal investigation into what prosecutors termed systematic celebrity stalking with racial motivation. But Karen's legal troubles were just beginning. Her surveillance operation had created evidence of a criminal conspiracy involving 8 co-conspirators who'd participated in organized harassment of a minority celebrity. Federal investigators love cases where defendants document their own crimes through social media posts and group messaging. That evening, as FBI agents served warrants at Karen's house and 8 co-conspirator residences, Karen posted one final social media message that would become the centerpiece of federal prosecution evidence. "They're trying to silence me because I exposed their criminal operation," she live-streamed from her white Range Rover while federal agents searched her house. This is what happens when honest Americans stand up to celebrity criminals and their corrupt government protection. But I'll never stop fighting for truth and community safety. The live stream captured Karen admitting to organized surveillance, acknowledging her targeting of Rihanna specifically, and threatening continued harassment despite pending criminal charges. It was a confession disguised as a manifesto, and prosecutors couldn't have written better evidence if they'd tried. Meanwhile, the HOA emergency meeting called to address Karen's arrest produced a unanimous vote removing her from all leadership positions. Board member Patricia Goldstein's motion was simple and devastating. Karen Whitmore has brought federal criminal investigation to our community through her personal harassment campaign. She no longer represents the interests or values of Platinum Heights residents. The vote was 6-0, with Karen's supporters either absent or unwilling to defend someone who'd turned their peaceful community into a federal crime scene. As Karen sat in county jail awaiting bail hearing on charges of assault, harassment, and federal civil rights violations, her final social media posts from her lawyer's phone revealed that she still didn't understand what had happened or why her crusade for community justice had resulted in criminal charges. "This is persecution of honest Americans who dare to question celebrity privilege," her lawyer posted on her behalf. Karen Whitmore is a victim of systematic intimidation designed to silence community leaders who expose uncomfortable truths about corruption and criminal activity. But the uncomfortable truth was that Karen had committed multiple federal crimes while trying to prove that someone else was a criminal. Her obsession with a car she'd never owned had evolved into a harassment campaign that would cost her everything she actually did own, including her house, her reputation, and her freedom. The federal civil rights trial was scheduled for 6 months later, and prosecutors were confident they had enough evidence to secure convictions on all charges. Karen's own social media posts, surveillance logs, and live-stream confessions had created an evidence file that defense attorneys called prosecutorial overkill and the most self-incriminating criminal case in recent memory. As I reviewed the federal investigation files while preparing for Rihanna's eventual testimony, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Karen had spent weeks trying to prove that Rihanna was a criminal, but the only crimes documented were Karen's own increasingly desperate attempts to justify her delusional obsession with someone else's legally purchased car. The lesson was simple but expensive. Wanting something doesn't make it yours, and accusing someone of theft because you couldn't afford what they could buy is a federal crime with mandatory prison time. The federal courthouse smelled like marble polish and broken dreams when Karen Whitmore shuffled through the metal detectors wearing an Orange County jail jumpsuit instead of her signature white tennis outfit. But here's the thing about entitled suburbanites who escalate car envy into federal harassment cases. They never realize that orange is a terrible color for someone with bleached blonde hair and a spray tan that's slowly fading to the color of old mayonnaise. The metallic click of handcuffs and leg shackles provided percussion for Karen's mumbled complaints about celebrity privilege and corrupt justice systems, while federal prosecutors smiled with the satisfaction of people holding winning lottery tickets. Federal prosecutor Maria Santos had built her career destroying white-collar criminals who thought money and zip codes granted immunity from consequences. Karen's case was what prosecutors call a slam dunk: documented evidence of systematic harassment, recorded confessions disguised as social media rants, and 8 co-conspirators who'd created their own evidence through group text messages and surveillance logs. "Your Honor," Santos addressed District Judge Patricia Williams during the arraignment hearing, "the defendant organized a criminal conspiracy to harass, stalk, and intimidate a minority celebrity based on false accusations of car theft. The evidence includes dozens of social media posts, recorded live streams admitting criminal intent, and organized surveillance operations involving multiple co-conspirators." Judge Williams, a no-nonsense African-American woman who'd spent 20 years dealing with entitled defendants who thought rules didn't apply to them, reviewed Karen's bail application with the kind of thorough attention that made defense attorneys nervous. Karen's lawyer, Thomas Bradford, was a desperate public defender who'd drawn the worst possible case assignment. His client had live-streamed her own confessions, organized documented harassment campaigns, and assaulted security personnel while screaming about racial conspiracies. Even public defenders have limits on what they can accomplish with impossible clients. Your Honor, my client maintains her innocence of all charges, Bradford began weakly. Mrs. Whitmore was acting on legitimate community safety concerns about suspicious activities in her neighborhood. Mr. Bradford, Judge Williams interrupted, your client organized 8 people to conduct 24-hour surveillance of a minority celebrity's home, filed false police reports, and physically attacked security personnel while making recorded statements about targeting the victim specifically. These aren't community safety concerns. These are federal hate crimes. The bail hearing lasted 47 minutes and ended with Karen remaining in custody pending trial. Judge Williams explained her decision with the kind of legal precision that defense attorneys study in law school. The defendant has demonstrated clear intent to continue harassing the victim, established a pattern of escalating criminal behavior, and organized multiple co-conspirators in systematic civil rights violations. Bail is denied due to flight risk and ongoing public safety concerns. Karen's reaction to denied bail was captured by courtroom sketch artists and would later become evidence of her continued mental deterioration. She stood up in her orange jumpsuit and screamed at Judge Williams with the kind of entitled fury that makes federal judges very interested in maximum sentencing guidelines. "This is racial discrimination," she shrieked, pointing at the judge with handcuffed hands. "You're protecting celebrity criminals because you're all part of the same conspiracy. I know my rights." Judge Williams calmly instructed bailiffs to remove Karen from the courtroom while adding contempt charges to her growing legal troubles. Karen's final words before being dragged away were captured by court reporters and would later be quoted in law school textbooks about defendant self-destruction. "I'll never apologize for protecting my community from these people." Meanwhile, the investigation into Karen's co-conspirators was revealing the full scope of the harassment conspiracy. FBI agent Sarah Martinez had discovered that the Platinum Heights Defense Force had been planning what they called Operation Celebrity Exposure, a coordinated campaign to drive Rihanna out of the neighborhood through systematic harassment and false criminal accusations. The text message evidence was particularly damaging. Group conversations revealed detailed planning for escalating harassment tactics, discussions about getting rid of undesirable residents, and explicit racial language that transformed community concerns into federal hate crime prosecution. Patricia Goldstein, former HOA board member, had provided crucial testimony about Karen's mental state and organizational abilities. Agent Martinez: "Karen was always controlling, but after the car incident, she became completely obsessed. She talked about Rihanna constantly, researched her background obsessively, and convinced herself that she was leading some kind of righteous crusade against celebrity corruption." The 8 co-conspirators faced varying charges based on their level of participation. Robert Chen and David Morrison, who'd helped organize surveillance schedules and coordinate harassment activities, faced federal conspiracy charges carrying 5 to 10 years in prison. The other participants, who'd mainly followed Karen's directions without understanding the legal consequences, faced lesser charges but still potentially serious prison time. The civil lawsuit filed by Rihanna's legal team was even more devastating than the criminal charges. Sandra Morrison had crafted a comprehensive federal civil rights lawsuit seeking $50 million in damages for harassment, emotional distress, interference with business operations, and violation of constitutional rights. Your Honor, Sandra addressed federal Judge Michael Thompson during the civil hearing. "The defendants engaged in a systematic campaign to terrorize my client based solely on her race and celebrity status. The harassment included organized surveillance, false criminal accusations, physical assault, and threats of continued targeting. This represents exactly the kind of racially motivated conspiracy that federal civil rights laws were designed to prevent and punish." The civil case evidence file was over 3,000 pages and included Karen's complete social media history, all text messages between co-conspirators, surveillance logs, recorded phone calls, and video evidence of the security assault. Legal experts called it the most thoroughly documented harassment case in recent federal court history. But Karen's legal troubles were expanding beyond criminal and civil federal cases. The state of California filed additional charges for filing false police reports, harassment, and assault. The HOA filed a lawsuit seeking damages for bringing negative publicity and federal investigation to the community. Even her homeowner's insurance company filed suit to recover costs associated with her criminal activities. Karen's husband, Michael Whitmore, filed for divorce and emergency restraining order after discovering that Karen had liquidated their joint investment accounts to fund her surveillance operation and legal fees. His divorce petition, filed in Los Angeles County Superior Court, painted a devastating picture of Karen's mental deterioration and financial irresponsibility. "My wife has become completely obsessed with a celebrity neighbor," Michael's petition read. "She has spent over $200,000 of our savings on surveillance equipment, private investigators, and legal fees for a harassment campaign I never authorized or supported. Her behavior has become dangerous and financially ruinous to our family." The divorce filing revealed that Karen had mortgaged their house to pay for her harassment campaign, borrowed against retirement accounts to fund surveillance operations, and sold jewelry and valuables to cover legal expenses. Her obsession with proving Rihanna was a criminal had consumed not just her mental health, but her entire financial life. Meanwhile, the community impact of Karen's prosecution was transforming Platinum Heights from a quiet luxury development into a cautionary tale about the consequences of suburban racism and HOA overreach. Property values had dropped 15% due to negative publicity associated with the federal hate crime prosecution. The new HOA board, led by Patricia Goldstein, implemented comprehensive anti-harassment policies and mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all residents. They also issued a formal public apology to Rihanna and established a community diversity fund as a gesture of reconciliation. The previous HOA leadership failed to represent the values of respect, tolerance, and community harmony that define Platinum Heights, Patricia announced during a packed community meeting. "Karen Whitmore's criminal activities do not represent our community, and we're committed to ensuring this kind of harassment never happens again." But Karen wasn't done fighting from her jail cell. She'd convinced herself that her prosecution was part of a vast conspiracy involving celebrities, federal judges, and corrupt law enforcement. Her jailhouse interviews with reporters revealed the full extent of her psychological deterioration and complete disconnect from reality. "I'm a political prisoner," she told Channel 7 News during a collect call interview. "They're destroying me because I exposed the truth about celebrity criminal operations and police corruption. This is what happens to Americans who dare to question the establishment." The interview, broadcast statewide, showed Karen in her orange jumpsuit with increasingly disheveled blonde hair, maintaining her innocence while describing elaborate conspiracy theories that made QAnon supporters seem rational by comparison. Psychiatric experts who reviewed Karen's statements and behavior patterns diagnosed what they termed delusional disorder with persecutory features exacerbated by narcissistic personality traits. In layman's terms, Karen had convinced herself she was the victim of persecution because admitting she was wrong about everything would require acknowledging that her entire worldview was built on entitled delusions. The trial was scheduled for 8 months later, and legal experts predicted that Karen would receive the maximum federal sentence due to the systematic nature of her crimes, her complete lack of remorse, and her continued threats against the victim. Federal hate crime prosecutions carry mandatory minimum sentences, and judges have limited discretion when defendants show no recognition of their criminal behavior. As I reviewed the case files while preparing for Rihanna's eventual testimony, I couldn't help but marvel at the mathematical precision of Karen's self-destruction. She'd started with car envy, escalated to false police reports, organized federal harassment conspiracies, committed assault and battery, and destroyed her marriage and financial security, all because she couldn't accept that someone else had legally purchased something she'd wanted but never owned. The lesson was brutal but clear. Entitled thinking has expensive consequences, and federal prosecutors don't care about your tennis outfit, your zip code, or your delusions about community leadership when you commit hate crimes against minority celebrities. Karen Whitmore had traded her white tennis uniform for an orange jumpsuit, her luxury home for a jail cell, and her suburban kingdom for federal prison time. The transformation was complete, permanent, and entirely self-inflicted. The trial of United States v. Whitmore began on a crisp October morning, with Karen shuffling into federal district court, wearing the same orange jumpsuit she'd worn for 6 months. Her once pristine blonde hair, now showing dark roots, and the kind of institutional styling that comes from county jail beauty services. But here's the thing about federal hate crime trials. They don't care about your previous social status, your tennis club membership, or how many times you've told reporters that you're the victim of a vast celebrity conspiracy. The cold fluorescent lighting of the courtroom made Karen's faded spray tan look like old leather, and her attempts to maintain dignity while shackled hand and foot created the kind of pathetic spectacle that makes law students study the consequences of entitled thinking. Federal prosecutor Maria Santos opened with what legal experts would later call one of the most devastating opening statements in recent civil rights prosecution history. She methodically outlined Karen's escalation from car envy to organized harassment, using Karen's own social media posts and live-stream confessions as evidence of premeditated hate crimes. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Santos began, gesturing toward the evidence displays that covered 3 walls of the courtroom. "What you're about to see is the systematic transformation of suburban entitlement into federal criminal conspiracy. The defendant didn't just file a false police report about a car she never owned. She organized 8 co-conspirators in a racially motivated harassment campaign designed to terrorize a minority celebrity into leaving her legally purchased home." The prosecution's evidence presentation lasted 4 days and included 247 exhibits. Karen's complete social media history showing escalating racial animus, text messages between co-conspirators planning harassment activities, surveillance logs documenting illegal stalking, and video evidence of Karen's physical assault on security personnel. But the most damaging evidence was Karen's own recorded statements. Santos played the courtroom, Karen's live stream from the night of her FBI arrest, where she'd admitted to organizing surveillance operations and targeting Rihanna specifically because of her race and celebrity status. "This is what happens when honest Americans stand up to celebrity criminals," Karen's voice echoed through the courtroom from speakers mounted near the jury box. "I'll never stop fighting these people who think they can buy their way out of consequences." The impact on the jury was visible and immediate. Several jurors visibly recoiled when Karen used the phrase "these people" while describing her targeting of Rihanna. The racial undertones that Karen thought she'd hidden were crystal clear to everyone listening. Defense attorney Thomas Bradford's strategy was doomed from the beginning. His client had created a comprehensive record of her own criminal intent through months of public statements, social media posts, and recorded confessions. Bradford's only option was arguing mental illness, but that required Karen's cooperation, something she refused to provide. "Your Honor, my client maintains that she was protecting her community from legitimate security threats," Bradford argued weakly during his opening statement. Mrs. Whitmore's actions, while perhaps misguided, were motivated by genuine concern for neighborhood safety, not racial animus. The argument collapsed within minutes when Santos presented Karen's private text messages to her surveillance team, which included explicit racial slurs and detailed plans for driving undesirable celebrity types out of Platinum Heights through systematic harassment. "Does community safety include referring to the victim using racial epithets?" Santos asked during cross-examination of Bradford's expert witness, a psychiatrist who'd tried to diagnose Karen with stress-induced temporary insanity. The psychiatric testimony backfired spectacularly when Karen interrupted her own expert witness to correct his diagnosis. "I'm not insane," she screamed from the defendant's table, her orange jumpsuit wrinkled from 6 months of jail wear. "I was protecting my community from criminals. That's not mental illness, that's patriotism." Judge Williams banged her gavel and threatened Karen with additional contempt charges, but the damage was done. Karen had just undermined her own insanity defense while confirming her complete lack of remorse for systematic harassment of a minority celebrity. The prosecution's star witness was Rihanna herself, who testified about the impact of Karen's harassment campaign on her sense of security, her business operations, and her family's well-being. Her testimony was measured, professional, and devastating in its emotional impact. "Your Honor, I purchased my home in Platinum Heights because I valued privacy and peaceful neighbors," Rihanna explained to the packed courtroom. "Instead, I found myself targeted by organized surveillance, false criminal accusations, and physical threats from people who decided I didn't belong in their community based on my race and celebrity status." When Santos asked about the specific impact of Karen's harassment, Rihanna's response provided the emotional context that transformed legal charges into human consequences. "I've dealt with criticism and negative attention throughout my career, but this was different. This was a coordinated campaign to make me feel unsafe in my own home. I had to increase security, limit my family's visits, and constantly worry about what false accusations might be filed next. No one should have to live under that kind of systematic intimidation." Karen's reaction to Rihanna's testimony revealed the full extent of her psychological deterioration. She spent the entire cross-examination muttering loud enough for the jury to hear, making comments about celebrity victim performances and fake emotional manipulation. Judge Williams warned Karen multiple times about disrupting the proceedings, but Karen seemed incapable of controlling her compulsive need to provide commentary on testimony that directly contradicted her delusional worldview. The co-conspirator testimony was equally damaging. Robert Chen, who'd pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation, described Karen's systematic recruitment of harassment participants and her detailed planning of surveillance operations. Karen was obsessed with proving that Rihanna was a criminal, Chen testified. She convinced us that we were protecting our community, but looking back, it's clear that we were participating in organized harassment based on racist assumptions about who belonged in our neighborhood. David Morrison's testimony revealed the scope of Karen's planning and organization abilities. Karen maintained detailed files on Rihanna's schedule, visitors, and activities. She assigned specific surveillance responsibilities to different participants and coordinated our activities through encrypted messaging apps. This wasn't spontaneous community concern. This was systematic stalking. The most devastating co-conspirator testimony came from Patricia Goldstein, Karen's former HOA board colleague, who described Karen's mental state and escalating obsessions. After the car incident, Karen became completely fixated on Rihanna, Patricia explained. She talked about her constantly, researched everything about her background and business, and convinced herself that she was leading some kind of righteous crusade. But it was clear to everyone that this was personal vendetta disguised as community activism. The federal sentencing guidelines for hate crimes are designed to ensure that systematic harassment based on race receives serious prison time. Karen faced a maximum of 15 years on the primary conspiracy charges, plus additional time for assault, false reporting, and contempt of court. During the penalty phase, Santos argued for maximum sentencing based on Karen's complete lack of remorse, her continued threats against the victim, and the systematic nature of her criminal organization. Your Honor, the defendant has shown no recognition of her criminal behavior, no remorse for the harm caused, and no indication that she would refrain from similar conduct if released. She organized 8 co-conspirators in systematic harassment, committed multiple felonies, and continues to blame the victim for her own criminal choices. This case demands maximum federal penalties to protect the community and deter similar hate crimes. Bradford's sentencing argument focused on Karen's lack of prior criminal record and her purported mental health issues. Your Honor, my client made serious mistakes, but she has no history of criminal behavior and was acting on misguided community concerns rather than genuine criminal intent. Judge Williams' sentencing statement became required reading in federal criminal law courses as an example of comprehensive judicial reasoning in hate crime cases. Mrs. Whitmore, you organized a systematic campaign of harassment, intimidation, and false accusations against a minority celebrity based solely on racial animus and suburban entitlement. Your actions represent exactly the kind of coordinated hate crimes that federal civil rights laws were designed to prevent and punish severely. Karen's sentence was comprehensive and devastating: 12 years in federal prison for conspiracy to violate civil rights, 3 additional years for assault and false reporting, lifetime probation supervision, $250,000 in criminal fines, and mandatory participation in psychological treatment and cultural sensitivity programs. The civil lawsuit settlement, announced the same day, required Karen to pay $15 million in damages to Rihanna for harassment, emotional distress, and business interference. Since Karen had already liquidated all assets to fund her harassment campaign and legal defense, the judgment would follow her for life, garnishing any future income or assets. Karen's reaction to sentencing provided her final moment of self-incrimination. This is racial discrimination against white Americans who dare to question celebrity privilege, she screamed as bailiffs prepared to escort her to federal prison. I'll never apologize for protecting my community from these people. Judge Williams calmly added 2 additional years for continued demonstration of racial animus and complete lack of rehabilitative potential. As Karen was led away to begin her federal prison sentence, still wearing the orange jumpsuit that had replaced her white tennis outfits, the courtroom observers included dozens of legal experts, civil rights advocates, and HOA reform activists who'd followed the case as a precedent-setting example of suburban racism consequences. The case of United States v. Whitmore established new precedents for federal prosecution of HOA harassment, celebrity stalking, and racially motivated community campaigns. Law schools added the case to their civil rights curricula as an example of how suburban entitlement can escalate into serious federal crimes with life-destroying consequences. Karen Whitmore had traded her tennis club membership for a federal prison number, her luxury home for a 6x9 cell, and her community leadership position for lifetime supervision as a convicted felon. The transformation was complete, permanent, and entirely self-inflicted. But more importantly, her prosecution sent a clear message to other entitled suburbanites who might consider organizing harassment campaigns against minority neighbors. Federal hate crime laws don't care about your zip code, your social status, or your delusional beliefs about community protection. The lesson was brutal but necessary. Systematic racism disguised as community activism is still systematic racism, and federal prosecutors have both the tools and the motivation to destroy anyone who thinks otherwise. Prompt for image generation, photorealistic federal courtroom scene during sentencing. A blonde woman in an orange jumpsuit with disheveled hair and faded spray tan sits at defendant's table with shackles. A stern African-American female judge presides from the bench while a prosecutor presents evidence displays covering the courtroom walls. Rihanna sits in the witness section wearing professional attire. The lighting is harsh institutional fluorescent with American flags and formal judicial decor. The atmosphere is grave and official, emphasizing justice being served. Professional legal documentary photography style, ultra-high definition. Federal prison camp Alderson smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams when Karen Whitmore arrived wearing shackles, and the kind of defeated expression that comes from trading a tennis club lifestyle for a 6x9 cell with a roommate who'd embezzled $12 million from a children's charity. But here's the thing about entitled suburbanites who discover that orange jumpsuits don't come in designer cuts and prison commissary food doesn't include organic kale smoothies. They either learn humility fast or spend their sentences writing delusional manifestos about government conspiracies and celebrity corruption. The harsh fluorescent lighting that never turned off made Karen's roots grow out faster than her understanding of how completely she'd destroyed her own life over someone else's legally purchased car. Karen's federal prison intake process was captured in institutional records that would later be studied by criminologists researching the psychology of suburban entitlement and racial harassment. Her initial psychological evaluation described persistent delusional thinking regarding perceived victimization and complete lack of insight into criminal behavior and its consequences. Prison psychologist Dr. Amanda Foster's notes painted a detailed picture of Karen's mental state 6 months after sentencing. Subject continues to maintain innocence of all charges and describes prosecution as politically motivated persecution, shows no recognition of harm caused to victim or community, demonstrates persistent racial bias disguised as community activism ideology. Karen's first cellmate was Maria Santos, a 52-year-old accountant serving 8 years for embezzling funds from a children's cancer charity. Maria lasted exactly 3 weeks before requesting a transfer due to what she described as constant racist rants about celebrity criminals and corrupt judges. This woman never stops talking about some singer who supposedly stole her car, Maria told prison officials. She's convinced that the entire federal justice system was bribed to protect celebrities from honest Americans like herself. It's exhausting listening to conspiracy theories 12 hours a day. Karen's second cellmate, Patricia Williams, lasted 4 days. Her transfer request was even more blunt. She called me a racial slur when I disagreed with her theories about celebrity criminal conspiracies. I'm not spending 2 years listening to this kind of hatred. Eventually, prison officials placed Karen in a single cell due to her inability to coexist with other inmates without creating racial tensions and harassment complaints. Her isolation only reinforced her delusional beliefs about being persecuted for telling uncomfortable truths about celebrity privilege. Meanwhile, the Platinum Heights community was undergoing a comprehensive transformation designed to ensure that Karen's type of systematic harassment could never happen again. The new HOA board, led by Patricia Goldstein, implemented policies that would become a national model for preventing discriminatory enforcement and racist community activism. The Platinum Heights Reconciliation Initiative included mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all residents, anonymous reporting systems for harassment complaints, and an ombudsman program to investigate discrimination concerns. Property values, which had dropped 15% during Karen's prosecution, began recovering as the community demonstrated its commitment to inclusive living and respectful neighbor relationships. More importantly, Rihanna had chosen to remain in Platinum Heights as a symbol that celebrities of color wouldn't be driven from their homes by organized racist harassment. Her continued presence, along with her gracious interactions with respectful neighbors, helped heal the community wounds that Karen's campaign had created. The civil lawsuit settlement funds were used to establish the Rihanna Community Harmony Foundation, which provided legal support for other minority families facing HOA harassment and funded educational programs about civil rights and fair housing laws. The foundation's first major success was supporting 3 other families in similar federal harassment prosecutions. Karen's co-conspirators faced varying consequences based on their cooperation levels and degrees of participation. Robert Chen and David Morrison received 18-month sentences in minimum security facilities and were released early for good behavior and cooperation with ongoing investigations. Both men issued public apologies acknowledging their participation in racially motivated harassment and volunteered for community service programs focused on civil rights education. The other surveillance participants received probation sentences but faced civil lawsuits that cost them tens of thousands in damages and legal fees. Several participants lost their jobs when employers discovered their involvement in federal hate crime prosecutions, and at least 3 families moved away from Platinum Heights due to community ostracism. But Karen's influence continued causing problems even from federal prison. Her jailhouse phone calls, monitored by prison officials, revealed ongoing attempts to organize harassment of Rihanna through third parties and recruit new supporters for what she called her Political Persecution Defense Fund. One recorded phone call to her estranged husband Michael captured the full extent of Karen's continuing delusions. "You need to hire private investigators to prove that Rihanna bribed the federal prosecutors," she instructed. "I have evidence that this whole case was a setup to silence me because I exposed celebrity criminal operations." Michael's response, also recorded, demonstrated why their divorce had been finalized within months of her sentencing. "Karen, you destroyed our marriage, our finances, and our reputation because you couldn't accept that someone else bought a car you wanted. There's no conspiracy, there's no corruption. There's just you refusing to take responsibility for your criminal behavior." The phone call ended with Karen screaming about traitors and brainwashed family members before prison officials terminated the conversation and restricted her phone privileges. Dr. Foster's follow-up psychological evaluations showed no improvement in Karen's insight or remorse levels after 18 months in federal prison. Subject continues to exhibit persistent delusional disorder with no recognition of criminal behavior. Shows increased paranoia regarding fellow inmates, prison staff, and family members. Prognosis for rehabilitation remains extremely poor. Karen's parole hearing, scheduled for 8 years into her sentence, would require her to demonstrate remorse, acknowledge her criminal behavior, and show understanding of the harm she'd caused. Based on her continued delusions and complete lack of insight, legal experts predicted that Karen would serve her full 15-year sentence. The precedent set by United States v. Whitmore became a powerful tool for federal prosecutors handling similar cases nationwide. The comprehensive evidence collection methods, the successful prosecution strategy, and the substantial sentences served as both deterrent and blueprint for future HOA harassment prosecutions. Law enforcement agencies developed training programs based on Karen's case, teaching officers how to recognize escalating harassment patterns and understand the federal implications of racially motivated community activism. The training materials included Karen's own social media posts and live-stream confessions as examples of how perpetrators often document their own criminal intent. Beverly Hills Luxury Motors implemented new policies requiring background checks and financial verification before allowing extended test drives or repeated visits to prevent obsessive behavior like Karen had exhibited. Sales manager Michael Rodriguez became a frequent speaker at automotive industry conferences about identifying and managing problematic customers who might escalate disappointment into criminal behavior. The case also influenced federal legislation regarding HOA oversight and discrimination prevention. The Karen Whitmore Prevention Act, introduced in Congress 18 months after her conviction, would require federal monitoring of HOAs with histories of discriminatory enforcement and provide additional legal protections for minority homeowners facing systematic harassment. Most importantly, Rihanna's victory demonstrated to other celebrities and minority families that organized suburban racism could be defeated through comprehensive legal action and community support. Her decision to remain in Platinum Heights and work with neighbors to build a more inclusive community became a model for how victims of harassment can transform their trauma into positive change. 3 years after Karen's conviction, Platinum Heights had become a showcase community for diversity, inclusion, and respectful neighbor relationships. The annual Community Harmony Festival attracted visitors from across the country who wanted to learn how a neighborhood could recover from systematic racism and build something better. Karen's former house, sold to pay her civil judgment debts, was purchased by an interracial family with 3 children who became beloved community members and active volunteers in local diversity programs. The symbolism wasn't lost on residents who'd watched Karen's campaign of hatred transform into an opportunity for genuine community building. As I concluded my documentation of this case, while preparing Rihanna's autobiography chapter about overcoming suburban racism, I reflected on the mathematical precision of consequences in Karen's story. She'd started with car envy, escalated through false police reports and organized harassment, and ended with federal prison time and lifetime financial destruction. But more importantly, her defeat had created positive changes that extended far beyond one luxury development. Other HOAs implemented anti-discrimination policies. Federal prosecutors gained new tools for handling celebrity harassment cases. Minority families received legal protections and community support systems. Karen Whitmore had intended to drive Rihanna out of Platinum Heights through systematic harassment and false criminal accusations. Instead, she'd accidentally created a more inclusive, welcoming community while destroying her own life through entitled racism and delusional thinking. The lesson was clear and comprehensive. Systematic harassment based on race and entitlement has federal consequences that don't disappear when you realize you've made terrible choices. Federal prosecutors, federal judges, and federal prisons don't care about your previous social status, your tennis club memberships, or your theories about celebrity conspiracies. As Karen continued serving her sentence in federal prison, wearing orange jumpsuits instead of white tennis outfits, and writing delusional appeals that courts routinely dismissed, Rihanna continued living peacefully in her legally purchased home, driving her legally purchased car, and enjoying the neighborly respect that Karen could have earned simply by treating others with basic human decency. Sometimes justice takes time, but when it arrives, it's comprehensive, permanent, and exactly what entitled racists deserve for thinking they can harass minority celebrities without facing serious consequences. The war between Karen's delusional entitlement and Rihanna's actual rights had ended with complete victory for truth, justice, and the principle that federal hate crime laws exist specifically to protect people like Rihanna from people like Karen. And in her federal prison cell, wearing orange instead of white, Karen Whitmore learned that some lessons cost everything you have and teach you nothing except that you should have minded your own business instead of calling 911 about someone else's legally purchased car.